All right, so welcome to week 3. This week, we're going to go ahead and start our new assignment, which would be our second app. So, just a quick reminder, the first app, which is that hello date button, is due tomorrow. I did give an extra day extension because of the holiday. And so, if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to stay after class or schedule an appointment and meet with me. I have really irregular office hours, and that's because everybody's working. Around it's 4:30. I'm sure there's people elsewhere in the United States in different time zones. So, it's usually send me an email, and then we will schedule something. Okay. So let's go ahead and I'm going to share. So I had got some feedback from my last recording from was it class one? Was it week one? And I was asked if I could share my whole screen because sometimes the some of the screens don't show up. So here it is. For week 3, there's the overview. There are 2 chapters that we're covering this week, so I do have it in the learning material. These are the slides that I will be covering today: interactive user interfaces and activities. And then there are 2 demo codes, the GeoQuiz Chapter 2 and GeoQuiz Chapter 3. And then there is assignment 2, which is the BMI, body mass index. And then week 3 discussion, and I will upload this recording once it's ready, okay? Any questions? No. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and start the lecture. So the first one is actually going to be the user interfaces. And then after I cover the lecture, shouldn't take me more than 30 minutes for both of them. I will go ahead and show you what is expected of assignment 2, run through it a little bit, and then show you some code as well. All right, and I should start from the beginning. There we go. Oops. All right, so then we have APCV 381 mobile device programming, and this is the interactive user interfaces. So this is chapter 2 of the Android Studio Big Nerd Ranch book. Okay, so the goals here are to review concepts to build Android applications and their components, understand interactive user interfaces, and practice one sample application using interactive user interfaces. So just a quick review on applications. For Android, right, they're written in Java or Kotlin. It's possible to write native code, but we will not cover that here. Okay. So there's a good separation and a corresponding security from other applications. Each application runs its own processes. So we talked about how each process has its own separate VM. So if a process runs, it's pretty much having your own virtual machine that is running inside of the Android Studio platform. Okay. Or not Android Studio, inside of Android operating system. So each application is assigned a unique Linux user ID, and by default, files of that applications are only visible to the application. So the files that you have for an app, other apps cannot access it unless you specifically give it access to. And we'll learn about that later on. But by default, anything you do in the app stays in the app. The app is the only one that's able to access those files that you created with that app. Then we have the concept of activities, and this is the basic component of most applications. So most applications have several activities that start each other as needed. So one activity starts another activity, then starts another activity, and each is implemented as a subclass of the base activity class. So you will see when we look at the code, we're going to have the main activity, and then from there we can create different activities. And from this main activity, like any object-oriented programming or any type of programming, a main class, same idea, activity class is the main one. And then we can write more classes and then just be calling that from the main one. So then tasks, right? What are tasks? So a task is a chain of related activities. So when we have different activities that are related to each other, it's called a task. And the task activity objects are stored in a stack with the currently running activity at the top. Okay, so with this, pretty much the task activity is moving to the front. So the task is it's a bunch of activities, right? And then whenever we need one, like it's placed at the front. So pretty much the whole stack, the tasks, right? It's a stack, and then you call into the front whatever you need for that. Okay, so at runtime, newly started activities are pushed onto the stack, and hitting the back button pops current activities off the stack. So it gives the illusion that there are multiple unrelated activities uh, were developed as part of the same application. Okay. So then the component life cycles. So Android can pause or terminate individual components. So for example, when task stack changes, the memory, so for example, when this task stack changes. So when we're moving from activity to activity, right? That's when we can pause the components or terminate them. When the memory gets really low, Android also pauses them. So that's why you say we have a lot of activities running in the background, and when the memory gets low, those activities pause, and that's why you get sometimes you have to scroll down to refresh the application. So the user stops interacting with when the user stops interacting with the application as well, so it stops at the or it pauses at the back. And then that's why when you leave an app and come back to it without closing the app, you are able to see some of the things that you were working on it. So it's just pauses. And then also when new application is launched, again, because you're leaving that original um, activity screen. So at these times, Android notifies the application by calling their lifecycle methods. Okay, so these are methods. So we know object-oriented, we have methods, and the lifecycle methods are called. So such as when we did this at the beginning, you didn't know what we were doing, but we did it when we did on create, right? We were creating an activity. We're creating a process. So the on create is a method, a lifecycle method, and we'll talk about the different lifecycle methods that are part of Android. Okay, so each component type has its own lifecycle. So, using the GeoQuiz, the demo app, as a reference, right? We're gonna go ahead and make it a little bit more complex. So before, when we were clicking on the true or false, right? It just gave us whether the answer was correct or incorrect. It was a toast, right? A toast, a little pop-up, and it tells it's true. If it was true, it was correct, and if it was false, it was incorrect, based on the question, right? We're gonna go ahead and add a button, and this button is gonna take us to a next question. All right, it's the next button is gonna give us more questions. So that's what we're gonna add a little bit of complexity here. So, and how are we gonna do that? Where we're gonna create a new class. Okay. So to create a new class in Android, we go into the project tool window in the left column of Android Studio, and then click on next, and then Kotlin file class. And we name the class, in this case, it was question, and we created a data class. Okay. For us, we do not have to create a data class, and I'll show you what type of class we're going to create. It's actually going to be a file, Kotlin file, and it's a little bit different. Again, going based off the book, but I'll show you how that looks in Android Studio, the current one. So then, adding questions to the class, we have to do the import. So, oops, let me go ahead and actually exit that and fix that right here. Okay, we have to go ahead and import a package. All right, so in here, we have package.com, beginnerranch.android.geoquiz. For us, as we know, we got edu, Arizona, infosec, your full name, and then we would be for us BMI in this case. Okay, so then we're going to import the components. So in this case, we use the keyword import and then androidx.annotation.string resource. So in here we have a data class called question, and we're saying we're going to go ahead and use the string resource from the resource folders that we have, and we've seen this before, the values that we use for the UI. So we're going to name that there. We're going to give it a value called text resource ID, and then we're going to give an integer, and then an integer, and then a value, and which is answer, and the answer is going to be a boolean, whether it's true or false. Okay, and so the string res denotes that an integer parameter, field, or method return a value is expected to be string resource reference. For example, here, exam android.r.string.ok. So looking at the object diagram for the GeoQuiz. First of all, we have three parts. We have the model, we have the controller, and we have the view layout. Okay, so let's go ahead and start from the, I guess from the top, the model, right? From here, every time we have a question, it's going to pull it, or the model here has all the questions. So the question bank is right here. We have a text ID and the answer, whether it's true or false. Okay, so the question, and each question has it's identified by its text ID, and then the answer, whether it's true or false. So then from here, the main activity, which is the one that's running, is going to go ahead and pull from this question bank. Okay, so it's going to pull from the question bank, and we're going to call this the current index. So this is the current index so that it knows what question it's at. From here, we're going to have a few things, right? And this is part of our layout. So the question text view, which, you know, it's being called by this main activity, is going to pull out that text view. It's a text view, right? So it's just going to pull out this right here, text that you see here. Then we have the two buttons. That's the true button and the false button, which are right here, and then the next button. Notice here, right? What is being displayed? So these four are going to be there at all times in the display, but here are the class, or yeah, the functions that we're going to be called, the question text view and the next button. These are the two things that we're going to be calling so that we can move right from question the text view, yeah. So when we call in the activity from the question bank, these are the two things that are going to be changing. Okay. All right, so when we update the layout, first we have the linear layout, and if you use the native layout that was there in the last assignment, that's totally fine. In the sample code that I was showing on the videos, I did change it to the linear layout, and the linear layout just pretty much gives everything in a linear mode so that everything's pretty centered. But that's what it is, right? The linear layout. And normally it comes in here with the schema, Android, app-res, Android. So this is pretty much what we're going to be pulling from some of the Android packages that are already there. Okay, so the linear layout. And in this linear layout, we have a few things. First, we have the text view, and the text view is that question that we had. Then we had the button, and this is the next button. Okay, we know because of the ID, this is the next button, and it's just, you know, adding some of the features. We make sure it's part of still the linear layout, right? And in this other linear layout, this is more of a horizontal layout. We have the two other buttons, the true and the false button. Okay, so notice here, we have a linear layout that takes care of the whole screen of that application, right? And then there's a sub linear layout, and this one is in charge of those two buttons. So let's look at the code. So in here, and sorry, I have to, you know, cut it in two so that we can actually see all of it, but pretty much this is a declaration here. Then we talked about the layout, making a match parent, making the gravity center so everything's kind of center, and the orientation is vertical. Then we have the text view, and this is that first question, right, that we have there. Then we have a linear layout section, and then this linear, and you can go ahead and, you know, put this next line before, after, it should still work, okay? But here we have the linear layout, and in this linear layout we have the two buttons inside. So notice that you can do that, but at the end of the day you still have to go ahead and finish with closing that linear layout. Any questions so far? If at any point you know, if you have any questions, please ask me, stop me. I forgot to say that. Please stop me. If I'm going too fast, also, I'm sorry about that. Like, let me know. I will slow down. I can. Okay, or if I need to explain in a different way. All right. So then, so again, it's the same thing in here. It's the same code. Pretty much, the only thing that's, oops. Oh, okay, here. And remember that this in this XML file is instead of the resources layout, and then it's called the activity main. And this is the main page, the one that we see when we first open that app. Okay, and remember we called this in their main activity that we specify. So then now the other file that we're changing here, right, for this geo quiz, we have now a test bank. We're gonna be adding a lot of strings. So everything that you see here in blue are the additions to what was, uh, yeah, the additions to how we had it in chapter 1 or module 1 of this. Okay, so we had the strings.xml file, and then here we're just naming or putting our questions. So question for, and we're giving it a specific ID. So this would be the ID question Australia. So that would be question oceans and whatnot. Okay. All right. And we were adding that next button as well. So we do have we added a string so that it's displayed on that next button. All right. So wiring up the user interface. So remember we go ahead and do that class main activity and then app comp activity. This is just to make sure that it's compatible, reverse compatibility. Okay. So we create a private value called question bank. And in here we create a list of questions. All right. And then from list of questions, the format that we're going to put for every question, we have r.string, right? And this is part of going ahead and calling in, saying we're going to pull it from our string resource folder string file, right? Question Australia, and that's why that ID is very important. Okay, and then comma, and then we enter whether the answer should be true or false. Right, so right here we're specifying what our answer is going to be, and we do the same for all of those questions. Okay, so that's the private value question bank. Now, we start our private variable as the current index equals 0. So then we would start pretty much from the first question. If you were to change this, then of course you would start, from a different question. But okay. So then a very important concept called the view binding. And this view binding allow us to go ahead and connect the different IDs that we have created in the resource string values and the color values with the activities, okay, and the XML. So we have something called the binding class, and this binding class we can use the activity to instate the binding class, and then the binding class is generated using that layout XML. And I'll show you where we change this binding class, right? And just so that we can go ahead and bind, right? Connect, binding, another word for connecting the different buttons that we have, the different views that we have with the variables that we are using. All right, so where do we do this, right? Now, I'm sure that when you first tried to load GeoQuiz, and I got emails about this, and that's why I posted that announcement, you were having issues with the Gradle. And what is this Gradle? Well, the Gradle is in charge of calling in all the resource packages that you need in order to run your application. So one of the things that we're going to go ahead and do is modify that build Gradle, so the app build Gradle file, and we're going to add the build features. Right, some of the features that we're going to add is called the view binding true. And this view binding true allows us to connect all these variables, right? Because we're not just connecting strings anymore, but we're connecting actual variables within the activity and the other classes. So this is very important so that we can connect it to the XML variables that we declare. But I'll show you again where that would be, but pretty much is in the app build.gradle file inside of the Android declaration. There's going to be more, and we just add this. Build features, view binding is equal to true. Okay. Now, to initialize the activity main binding, we actually have to go ahead and, in our main activity, we have to go ahead and start the private lay init of variable binding. Okay. And then this one we're just calling the activity main binding so that we can bind the things that the items that we have in that main activity XML file. Okay, and then again, this I was changing the back the templates for this, so it's why it's changed like this. But pretty much we have an override function, right? And this function we have an onCreate like we saw before. But in here in this onCreate, we're gonna go ahead and call in our binding. So we're gonna say binding is equal to, and then we're gonna say activity main binding dot inflate, and this is a layout inflator. Okay. And we'll talk more about what inflate is in a little bit. So wiring up the text view and the buttons. So again, we have, main activity. Oh yeah, and also the import. So when you write this, where you say var binding, colon activity main binding, it's going to give you in red. And how do you import this? Well, you're gonna go ahead and just right click on it, and it's gonna ask you if you want to do the import. So Android Studio will automatically add all that. But pretty much it's just the import your package information and then data binding dot activity main binding. Now in this override function, again, right, this is what I mentioned before, binding, we're declaring this. Binding is equal to activity main binding so that we can go ahead and bind things from the main activity XML file. And then we're going to do dot inflate and layout inflator. And so then when we do the binding, right, for each one of the buttons that we bring, we're going to go ahead and call the binding. So binding dot, and then we say whatever that button is. Okay, and then we do the set on click listener. And before, right, with the hello date, we were just calling in that date display. But for ours, when we do our BMI, and I'll talk more a little bit about assignment 2, but we're going to be doing calculating the body mass index. We're actually going to implement some calculations. Okay, so that's what we're going to be adding in those. And we're going to create our own class to do those calculations. But anyways, so we got binding for each one of the buttons, right? When these buttons, where do they live? Well, they live in the activity main activity main XML file. And then in here, also a binding for the question text view. There's one right there. Okay. All right, so then when we query or checking query answers, so we write a specific function called a check answers, and this one uses a Boolean variable. And remember when we were passing those variables, when we were looking at the when we were declaring all the questions, the question test bank, we were adding the question and then we were doing comma and then whether it was true or false. So that is why it's going to take an input, a Boolean input of the user answer and then true or false. So here we have a value called correct answer is equal to the question bank, right? And that is the function that we declare. Look at the current index and then dot answer. And then we have a value called message resource ID. And so then if the answer is the correct answer, right, then we're going to go ahead and display correct toast. And remember, these toasts are just little pop-ups that show up. Or else, if the answer is obviously not correct, then we're just going to do an incorrect toast. And then we're going to say toast dot make text this message ID toast length short. So don't worry about toasts right now. We won't really use them until later on. But notice, for this simple example, we're just when we do the geo quiz, the toast is just to tell us whether something is correct or a question is correct or incorrect. One of the other things that we can do with Android Studio is adding icons. And how do we add icons? We have to do a file, select new, and then new vector asset. And this we're going to put in our resource folder, okay? And that's all we have to do. And then from here, we can go ahead and do a clip art. And then when you click on it, it's going to show a pop-up and you get to decide what icon you want to pick. And this one pretty much is what's already embedded in Android Studio. However, you can go ahead and import your own icons. I suggest use SVG. So if you go anywhere, Android Studio, Android developer also has some icons that you can use. Google has icons that you can use. So just look them up as long as they're SVG files. You can go ahead and import them and they become your icons. Now these icons you can use as your icon for the app itself when you see the app on your phone, Or you can also add some of the icons inside of your activities, inside of your actual application. Okay. And so now going back into the resource layout activity XML file, we're going to go ahead. So after you do you go ahead and create a vector asset for your icon. We're going to go ahead and call it in. So how do we do that? We do Android colon drawable end and then equals and then whatever we named it. So in here, we should name it something different, right? But I think it was called arrow right. But you name the icon and you go through, like the pop-ups and fill in. But that's what you're going to be calling. So drawable and then whatever you named it, and then you can go ahead and change the padding. In this case, 4DP. So some of the notes, right? So this is, I guess, the end of chapter 2. So reading slides cannot replace reading the textbook chapters 1 and 2 and playing the code example. So please follow the provided links at the 12 site to download the chapter project packages. Use this forum to troubleshoot the difference between the updates and the book. So yes, the book is really outdated. The main concepts are still there, right? But when you try to go ahead and use the same code, the same packages, they're really updated. So where do we go? We can go into https forums.bigranch.com. And then here, this is pretty much a forum where other developers are updating those codes and then kind of showing the differences. So notice that this chapter includes a section on running and testing apps on a physical device. So if you own a physical device, you can refer to this chapter to configure it using it to develop apps. So again, do not do it, especially with the newer phones, right? You cannot install these apps unless you go into the developer mode, and the developer mode does have give you more privileges, more access to doing more things, but you also are putting some security risk in place. Okay, so even when you do this, some of the apps are not going to let you or not going to run in your phone anymore. If you go into the developer mode, they won't let you run, such as bank apps. Some bank apps won't let you. So it's at your own risk. However, if you have an old phone that you don't really care for, I would encourage you to do it. Okay, definitely do it if you have an extra phone. But if you um, don't do it. Okay. Uh, okay. So then, yeah, this is to acknowledge. So this was chapter 2 of the Big Nerd Ranch. Any questions on chapter 2? Okay, so if there are no questions, I'm gonna go ahead and move on to chapter 3. So there are 2 chapters this week, and again, they're pretty short. So after I move on to that chapter, then I am going to refer to Android Studio. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and start this. All right, so this is chapter 3 of the Android Studio Big Nerd Ranch, and this is covering activities. So the goal is to understand the states of an activity running during its life cycle and implements life cycle methods. Okay. So the activity class. One application component is an application component type. So there are different types of components such as, and we'll look about fragments and other things like that. Okay, but this is one application component type, the activities in the class. And so this one provides a visual interface for a single screen. Typically supports one thing a user can do, for example, view an email message or show a login screen. So just one screen at a time, that's all I can show you. And applications usually include several activities. So some of the applications that you have running that has several tasks, it has multiple activities. So for example, we were talking about a bank app, right? But you have first the login screen, and then after you're able to log in, it takes you to a different screen, the welcome screen, the dashboard, and from there, you can go ahead and click on different items and take you to different screens. So it has different activities, but also fragments. And we'll talk a little bit about fragments later on. Not for this assignment, but assignment 3 will cover fragments. All right, so tasks. And we talked about this, right? Task is a set of related activities, not necessarily provided by the same application package. And so Android manages the system activity stack, launching the activity, places it on top of the stack, hitting the back button pops activity off the stack. So in here, right, when we go ahead and click on home, it closes everything. So you just have the home screen. Um, then if you click on that little square, it shows the recent. So you have pretty much a list of all the apps that are running, that are paused or stopped, that are in the background. Okay. And so task stack. So in here we have all these activities, right? And then we have in the back stack we have an activity. This is the root activity for that task. Then we have um, activity 2, right? So in this activity, so we have activity 1, and then it's just the native one. This activity 1 is the first activity that you see when you first open this application. Now, when we click on Start Activity 2, it is going to take us to Activity 2. Okay, and then this Activity 2, right, Activity 1 is on pause, right, because it still exists, and it's running actively Activity 2. So that's the screen that you're going to be on. So this screen is, right, it's in the background pausing. And then when you click on Activity 3, right, it's going to take you to the Activity 3 screen. And this activity screen is going to be there, right? So then it'd be like the next one would be running with this one, and this would be on pause, okay? And then when we go ahead and click on the back button, and that was the little, oops, back button that we saw here, right? It's going to go ahead and take us, it's going to go ahead and take us to it. Where'd it go? Sorry. Okay, it's going to take us back to activity 3. So that would be this. So going back here. Okay, so in here, when we hit the back button, and so once we hit the back button again on activity 3 is going to be destroyed, and then you're just going to be left with activity 1 and activity 2. Okay. All right, so the activity states, and these are the 4 ones that that we're going to be looking at, and we're going to be using some of these methods such as onCreate to go ahead and start or go change it from stop to sorry. So I'll just walk through each one of them. Okay, so non-existing, right? That just the app is closed, nothing really exists. Stopped. This is when it's the activity is not visible and does not have focus in memory and can be terminated at any point. Then there's resumed. This one is visible, has focus, and is in memory. And then pause, right? This one is visible, does not have focus in memory, and can be terminated. So resume is normally the one that it's on the foreground. It's to the front. That's the one that you're actually looking at. Okay. So then we have. So going here in this diagram, we have non-existing. Again, it doesn't exist. The app is closed. Nothing is done. When you first open the app, then we call the onCreate. Okay, and this onCreate takes us to the life cycle of the actual activity, right? The application, and it takes us to the stop. And it's in the stop until you go ahead and do the onStart. Once you click on the onStart, it takes us to the pause. And then the pause, go ahead and takes us to the or once it's paused, right, we can go ahead and use the on resume to go ahead and bring it to the foreground. But once we are no longer using it, or we resumed we're actively interacting with this app, so then we take it back, right? So if you're not using it anymore, it's in the pause, it's still there. And then you can go ahead and call in the stop to stop the app, and then when you go ahead and close the app, that's you call in the on destroy. Okay, so it's non-existing. So that's pretty much the life cycle of any activity app. Okay, so the activity life cycle. So Android communicates state changes by calling the activity's life cycle method. So again, these are the life cycle methods: on create, on start, on resume, on pause, on stop, and on destroy. And that's the whole life cycle. And so that means that the methods listed in the following slides should not be called in your program. They are callback methods called by your Android for the app activity. So these ones, okay? Now, protected, like and that's why we use protected. So that's the difference. The other thing between these, right? So we call on create, on start, on resume, on destroy, whatever. But then when we use the unprotected or protected, then the app doesn't mess with. Like that's for Android to go ahead and use. Okay. So these are all of them. All right. So logging the activity lifecycle. So making log messages in Android Studio, we use the android.util.log. And this one we're going to have to use a public static int d string tag, a string message. Okay, so we're going to be using tag. Pretty much tag is what is going to allow us to um, log some of the messages that are there. Okay, so and then from here we can go ahead and use a log cat, and I'll show you where that's it to look at the logs that are running for this specific activity. All right, so then we have, oh, and this is how it looks, or how it used to look. Actually, no, this is how it looks. Yes, maybe. Uh, but I'll show you when we'll move on to the Android Studio. All right, so looking into each one of these methods, we have onCreate, right? Activities being created. This is set up global state, so we have a call super.onCreate. It inflates the user interface views, configures the views as necessary, and sets the activities content view. Then we have the onStart. This is activity about to become visible, okay? But it's not there yet, so uh, we do that because there are some processes that are running in the backgrounds, packages that are being sent to the front, things that are working on being displayed coming to the foreground. So that's why there's the onStart. And then the onResume, about to start interacting with the user. So in this one, onResumed, this is where the user interacts. When you're pressing the buttons, everything, all the processes should be working fine for that activity. And then on pause, focus about to switch to another activity. So typical actions are save persistent state or shut down if it's an unneeded behavior. And so when does this happen? And you'll see where we look at the BMI, where we go ahead and switch screens. And so that's the other thing. The BMI assignment is going to cover assignment 2 and assignment 3. So you're going to build on from assignment 2 to get assignment 3 done. Okay, so but you're going to see how when we switch from one screen calculating the heart rate, which is the third assignment. But pretty much, and then we want to come back and make sure that the state of the application is saved to any values that we input there. So on stop, the activity is no longer visible to the user, and then it's working in the background to go ahead and kill anything that needs to be killed to go into the non-existent. Okay, so on destroy, activity is about to be destroyed. Now here's again another process, another diagram, but pretty much the same thing. Okay, activity launch. When the activity is launched, then we have the onCreate method, onStart, and then onResume. So all these, right? And one pushes the other, and then this determines what's going to be, coming up on the screen. So then the activity is running, and then when you're no longer looking at the activity, for example, move on to another screen, then we go on pause, and then we can go ahead and stop and destroy and shut down the activity, or we can go ahead and go on stop, and then going back to that screen, we still have to call the onStart, onResume, and run the activity. So we don't have to do onCreate if it's stopped and we didn't destroy it, okay? Non-stop apps with higher priority need memory, so then the app process is going to get killed. So if this app is, like using a lot of memory, and there's a new app that you opened and needs more memory, then it's going to go ahead and kill the whole process, and then you would have to do start from the onCreate. But unless other apps really need the memory, then you're fine. It will take you from the onStart. All right, so temporary leaving an activity. What happens when we temporarily leave an activity? So we can run the GeoQuest app from Android Studio, and then press the home button and see what happens. So what state is the main activity on GeoQuest now? So when we do this, so let's take a look. And then We will take a look when that happens, okay? And then when finishing activity, so we were going to run the GeoQuiz app from Android Studio and then press the back button and see what happens and what state is the main activity of GeoQuiz now. So these are the two things that we're going to look at right now when we look at the Logcat in Android Studio. We're going to be pressing these buttons on the Android emulator. Now, finish an activity. Oh, sorry. Rotating an activity. So when we run the GeoQuiz app from Android Studio and we press the next button to reveal the second quiz question, and we rotate the device, what happens? So what is the main activity of GeoQuiz now? Okay. So device configuration changes and the activity lifecycle. The device configurations include characteristics including screen orientation, screen density, screen size, keyboard type, dock mode, language, and more. Typically, the applications provide alternative resources to match different device configurations. So even with this, right, we have to look at the life cycle to determine, or sorry, the device configurations, right? So when we rotate the screen, what is going to happen then? Right, what is going to happen when we rotate the screen? Because now, guess what? Your button sizes are going to change. The screen is going to change. The layout itself is going to change, right? Your width is not going to be the same as your height. So what is going to happen, right? How are we going to make these configurations? So for a configuration characteristic that can be changed during runtime, alternative resources can be provided. Rotating a device changes device configuration. So then we can have alternative layouts that we can have. So you create a layout for when your phone is rotated horizontal instead of having it vertical, right? So you have to create, you don't have to for this one. We'll talk about the view model that will take care of this, okay? But for now, that's it. Any questions? No questions? Okay, if there are no questions, then I'm going to go ahead and go over the geo quiz. And I had two, and I think this is the I wonder which one is which. Okay, I think this is the first one. No, the green one is the first one. Okay, so I'll talk about this one. All right, so this is the first Geo Quiz Chapter 2. All right, so in here, how do we create a class? So let me start with that. So you're gonna go ahead and right click and then click on New, and then you can go ahead and do Kotlin class file, and then in here you have to name it. So in our case, and you'll see next week, we're gonna be BMI view model. Okay. So that's how you create it, and you can create a class or a file, it doesn't matter. When you work on it, it will change back and like it will change based on your needs. So it's okay if you declare class or file for right now. I'm just gonna go ahead and create a file just so that you see what's the difference. So you're gonna see that the extension is gonna show us KT as Kotlin file instead of the actual class. Okay, so let me go ahead and do that. Press enter, and there we go. Okay. I noticed that it automatically created that package for us. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this because we don't need it. And I don't want it to mess with the rest. Okay. All right. So let's look at the main activity, right? So in our main activity, as I mentioned, we had the class, main activity. We have all our imports right here. The test bank, the question bank, okay? Their binding, right? I'm going to talk about where to find that binding right now, but we had our binding. We had our onCreate, right? We talk about the lifecycle method, so onCreate, that was one of them. And so then that's what it's supposed to do when it's creating. Then we had a specific function to update the question, and then a function to check the answer. Okay, so this one updates with the next button, and this one go ahead and checks the answer, whether it's correct or false. And so when we look at here, right, we look at our next button. And the next button, again, you're just calling that private function update question. And in here, in our true button, we're calling that function called check answer, as well as our false button, check answer. If the user answer true, then it's that, and if it's answer false, then it's that. Okay. So those are the few classes that we have in this geo quiz. Now, looking at the main activity, I mentioned There we go. I mentioned, right, that we had a linear layout. We had the text view in here, which, oh, sorry, the linear layout was for the whole thing. Then we had a text view, which was just the question. And then inside a linear layout, we had the two buttons and then a button outside of that. So that's the next button. I also mentioned the strings, right? We have all the questions here in the string resource folder, the string file. And then what else? Look at this. Okay. And the drawable, right? So this is where we're going to go ahead and put in um, our icons. Okay, so these are going to be here, but this arrow right? So to do this, you're going to go here, and then create a new, and then in vector asset. From your vector asset, you can go ahead and click clip art, and then click here, and then select from whatever icon you want to go ahead and import. Okay, so I'm not going to do that. Well, I want to go back. Let's do uh, let's just do let's do action actually. So okay, and then you just do okay, and then from here you choose the size, and then you give it a name. Okay, I'm gonna put just two-tone. Just that's fine if it's like that. Okay. The other way that you can do it is use a local file, and then of course find or download it somewhere. I would download it inside of the same folder that you have your app running, somewhere there, and then just browse it and save it there. Okay, so I'm just going to do this one and then next, and then that's fine, and you can go ahead and finish, and it's there. Okay, so that's the one. So that's how you would import your icons in the, again, resource drawable file. Right. The other thing I do want to talk about is the themes. So these themes have to do with how your app, again, theme is, right? Whatever themes you have. So there's the themes XML and the themes Night. So these themes already come up when you go ahead and create a new activity and make sure it's in the empty view. If you don't do that, then the themes don't come up. But you can go ahead and change those what's it called? Those styles in here. Okay. All right. So those are the things. Okay, so the other thing we need to change here, right, is in the build Gradle. So now here is something that we need to add. So when you first create your application with an empty view, right, you're gonna have to go in here after it's built, after it's compiled, go into the build Gradle, and then under the Android here, you're gonna go ahead and add this build features. Without this, you won't be able to and view binding. Without this, you won't be able to bind your buttons and your icons to your activities file. So you do need to add those, okay? So, and then the other thing that we need to add are pretty much some of the implementations. But I'll talk about implementations next week when we talk about the view model a little bit more, okay? So, so those are the things that I think that's it for the geo quiz. Oh, okay. So now, I talked about the logcat. So some of the tags, I think this one doesn't have it. Yeah, this one doesn't have the tag. So I'm gonna go ahead and close this one for right now. And then the geo quiz is, I'm gonna stop this app. So I'm gonna show you, okay. And then close this one. All right, so this geo quiz, right? We have the logcat. All right, and actually let's run this. So what happens when we first start the active? So it's on stop, right? That's because I closed the other app or I closed the other emulator. So submit activity. So let me go ahead and run it. So look what happened here. Okay. We'll look at these. So on start was called, and then we have on resume. Okay, so these are on create first called, and then on start, on resume. This is a life cycle. So this is how you would know if your app is behaving well, if it's doing what it's supposed to, or at least know where things were at. Okay. Now let's see what happens when we click on our true button. Okay, what happens when you click on our false button, and then our next button? So look at our next point again. And our next point. Okay, when what's gonna happen when we close the activity or when we switch to another activity? Let's see. Look what happened. We had the on pause and on stopped. Okay. All right, so then let's go ahead and come back to our quiz. And now we see the on start, right? So we didn't have to do the on create. So because the app wasn't completely shut down, it wasn't stopped. So, and then we on resume. So now we're here. Now we can go ahead and interact. So it's ready for us. Okay, now to get here, you just click on the log cat, and this is our log cat that tells us, how things are doing. So the other thing I do want to yeah, look at is the build, right? So sometimes we're gonna get some build errors, and this is where you were gonna see and read the errors, right? See what's going on. For example, this one doesn't have it. Okay, I don't have an error there, but pretty much. Okay. All right. So what's gonna happen when we rotate our phone? So look at that. So it was rotated. So again, let's move on to the next question and then let's rotate it back. So notice that our question, right, came back to the first question. So look, I'm gonna switch it to what is this? What is the cap? Is the Nile River, this the source of the Nile River is in Egypt. Okay, so that's the question there. I'm gonna see if I can pop it up so you could see it a little bit better. Okay, the source of the Nile River is Egypt. True or false, right? Doesn't matter what answer I put there. What I want to show you is this. Okay, when I click next, right, the Amazon River is the longest river in the Americas. Now let's go ahead and rotate this phone. Now look what happened. The question didn't stay where it was supposed to. It actually switched back to the first question, which was Canberra. Canberra is the capital of Australia. Okay, so notice that. So when this was turned back, right, we move here. It's so that's the point that I wanted to show you here, okay? And we're gonna resolve this the next week. So we'll talk about how we're gonna fix that. But for right now, this should be good. All right, so in here, what I want to show you though is that we have a tag, right? And this tag is the main activity. Okay, so we can go ahead and oops, click on this tag right here and just put main activity. And then you can just go ahead and do that keyword search here in this logcat. Okay. All right. So let me ask one more time. Are there any questions on this? No? Okay. So if there are no questions, I do have 6 minutes, so I'm going to talk a little bit of assignment 2. Okay. So assignment 2. What is the deal on assignment 2? So in here, we're going to create an app that allows us to enter data. So in this case, it's not just about, clicking a button and giving us a date, but actually we're going to enter data. And the data that we're going to require is the weight and the height of a person in English units. Okay, so I see the English units, pounds and inches. And to calculate the body mass index. And the formula to calculate this body mass index is the weight in pounds times 703 over the height in inches times the height in inches. Okay, so now you might go ahead and ask for what's it called, for a user to say, give me the feet and the inches. In the case, just do the conversion of obviously multiplying the feet times 12. Okay. And then that way you'll get, so 12 times whatever feet times whatever inches you get, okay? So then now the message should also display a message based on the following information. If the BMI after the calculation is less than 18.5, then we're going to say it's underweight. If it's between 18.5 and 24.9, it's normal. And then greater than 24.9 but less than 30 is overweight, and greater than or equal to 30 is called obese. Okay, and each one of these have to have a different color as well. So this is an example. Now notice that you do have to put it to is it numerical one digit to the right of the decimal output, so to the 10th place of your calculation. Okay, so yes, your 10th place. So you're gonna be using, and there's you know, your app needs to have 3 buttons. The first one is the first step should be perform the calculation when the user clicks the calculate button. So that's the first button, calculate button. And then when the user clicks the clear button, the app should clear all the text in the display boxes. And then the third button is to calculate heart rate. And then when you press this, app is going to do nothing for right now. So you don't have to make it do anything right now. Just have a button that says calculate heart rate and just leave it there. We're going to use it for assignment 3. Okay. All right. So you should design the layout for the main screen format and the label entry pairs. And you should have the text box on this on the screen. So for example here, right? So you would have like a message, a text message here is like, let's calculate your BMI. You could name it something else, right? Then ask the question, how tall are you? And feet in inches, or you could just do it inches. If you do feet, make sure that you do the calculation by multiplying by 12. Then the next question is how much do you weigh? And make sure to put on the background, right? A display in feet, inches, and then pounds so that they know what units to enter. Then these are the 3 buttons, the calculate button and the clear, which are next to each other. And then the calculate heart rate, it's a button, not doing anything for the moment. Okay. All right. So notice the other thing, I didn't talk about this, but we use the text view to look at the text that we're not changing, but we use the edit view widget, right, to input text. And I'll talk about a little bit more of this next week, but pretty much instead of text view, you just do edit text and same idea as a text view, okay? But now you get to input text. Now notice that the app is not required to have the exact UI like the one above, but it does require for all the parts to be there. If you wanna, like put the calculator, the clear some like on top of each other, you can. Uh, if you want to put the weight before the height, that's totally fine. Wherever you want to rearrange it, but all the components must be there. Okay. All right. So then, so the base theme provided by Android Studio when creating a project has no action bar. Okay. So then, to make sure that it does have an action bar, you're gonna have to go ahead and go into the themes file, and then add. The theme, okay, and have an action, dark action bar in this case, or action bar, and that's this right here, the action bar. Okay, so normally the apps don't have it, so you do have to go ahead and change the theme. And to change that theme, right, we talked about going into the values and then themes, and then inside of your themes, have the action, uh, or you just have to have a dark action bar and for the that one, or just I guess for both of them. Okay, action bar. All right, so then uh, the user makes input of height and weight and click on the calculate button. The BMI results in the gets display to collect the user. Okay, so use that edit text, so some edit text field. So that's the widget that you're going to be using. On the other hand, when displaying calculation results, assume that you want to color a text view using the yellow color. You should use something like this. Okay, so again, you're gonna go ahead and use this some sample code that it's being there so that you can use the different colors. So this is an example. When we put in the calculation, this BMI of 25.7, so it's overweight. Notice it's yellow. For BMI, which is in the normal range, it's green. And then part 2, right? And I'll talk about part 2 more next week, but pretty much we're going to create a view model to make sure that when we rotate that screen, that we don't have, the values don't go away. Now, some notes on the build and the build Gradle, okay? We have to go ahead and do this when we implement the view model. Again, I'll cover that next week. But for right now, make sure that you do have the Android, inside of the Android, we have the build features view binding set it equal to true. Okay. And then again, to turn it in, you have to submit the zip file as well as a short video screencast showing the functionality of your app. All right. And so then the last thing, I know I'm over time now, but I do want to show you for anybody that wants to work ahead. On if I have it here. Okay, I do have it. All right. So then let's go ahead and stop this, the app that's running in the background, and let's run this one. So this is again, BMI sample. It's not complete yet. I was trying to get it done um, before the class. So notice here, right? I have the themes, but I have no action bar. So I want to call it here, I think dark action bar. Oh, and I have to import the theme. Okay, so I'm not gonna do that right now. I'll make sure to have it in the next video, in the next lecture. Okay, but I don't have it here, but you do want to add it. All right, so this is the view model, and I don't want to show you the whole class. Uh, oh, so forget about this one actually. Look at the main activity. And in here, I have my calculations, I have the onCreate, the binding that I need, the check inputs, and then calculation of BMI, and then displaying of the BMI, okay, and the clear inputs. So that's where I have it. All right, so running this app, I have, I'm gonna say 5 feet, 2 inches, and then how many pounds? I'm gonna say 135. I'm gonna calculate it, and it's normal, and it gives it BMI. And I'm gonna go ahead and clear it. So it clears everything out. So now I'm gonna say I am 6 feet, 4 inches, and I am 180 pounds. Okay, I'm gonna calculate it. Oh, I guess it's normal still. What if I put 280? Oops. I have obese. Notice that's in red. And what if I put like I'm 100? It should be really underweight. Okay, and it calculates the BMI. Now the calculate heart shouldn't take us anywhere, but the clear should go ahead and clear us out. And then when we rotate, right, the calculation and the number should be there, right? But again, we'll talk about that in the next class. How do we do this with the view model? Okay, but for now, um, you can go ahead and have this. All right, any questions? I know it's a lot of information, um, so if you don't have any questions now, but okay, awesome. So no questions. If you have any questions, please do email me. Um, let me know, and I'll try to clarify things. If I need to make another video, I'll be more than happy to. Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording, and I'm going to leave this next few minutes for anybody that's here and has any questions.